Oh. It is. Hi there, Danny. How are you doing? Thank you. That's great. Are you an organization?
What would you like me to say? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? A little more, yes. I love being here. Safe, affordable, hurricane-resistant housing. Safe, affordable, hurricane-resistant housing is the missing link to help farm worker families get out of poverty. Immokalee as one of the worst cities in which safe, affordable, hurricane-resistant housing.
That will be good. Carol?
Good afternoon. Is this on? No. Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces and some newer faces. My name is Reverend Angela Wells Bean. I have the privilege of serving here at Naples United Church of Christ as the Minister for Congregational Care. If you are new to our campus, I am thrilled that you're here for this really important conversation this afternoon. Just one logistical piece of housekeeping that may prove important is where the restrooms are. And so you can go through that door, and if you go through that door and down the hallway to your right, they're basically right behind us. So if you need the restroom, you can make your way over there. I want to invite you to join us any Sunday morning for worship at 9 or 11 a.m. We also have a ton of community programming throughout our year. It's really kicking off right about now, going through the spring. And so if you're not inclined to join us for worship, that's totally fine. All of our programs are open to the community. And I want to draw your attention to this piece of paper, which you don't have yet, but you'll probably hopefully get in your hands before you leave today. And this is all of the initiatives focused on the housing crisis here in Greater Collier County that our Justice Committee is sponsoring for this whole year. So this is only the first program of 6. So we've got them going all the way through April. So grab one of these before you go so you can put the other dates and the other events on your calendar. And each event is trying to address the housing crisis from a different lens and a different perspective and how it's affecting specific populations. So you can grab one of these before you leave. And this afternoon's program is co-sponsored by 2 groups in our church, our Board of Mission and Outreach and our Justice Committee. And you're hearing from me because I have the privilege of being the clergy liaison to both of those really important boards and committees in the life of our church, doing wonderful ministry. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Jen Walker. She's the chair of our Justice Committee and was instrumental in creating this afternoon's program, and she will introduce our guest speakers.
Thank you, Angela. And welcome. Welcome to the first program in this series of 6, as Angela has said. We are really committed to trying to tackle this subject and see if we can help make a difference in the affordable crisis housing in our area. And if you haven't read today's paper, there's a major article with a lot of very current information on the housing crisis. It's on the front page of today's paper. So I encourage you to do that, or you can borrow my paper when the meeting is over. Before I go further, I want to cover some housekeeping details. As you know, this is a webinar at the same time that it's an in-person program. After our speakers have presented their stories, we'll open up the floor to the questions, and we're going to ask everyone here in the room, if you have a question, to come up to the mic, and we'll have a mic. This handheld mic will be stationary in the front. That way, the people who are listening in by Zoom will also hear the question. The program is streamed in webinar format, which allows the viewers to post their questions in the chat function at the bottom of their screen. And Leslie Stevens in the back is emceeing those questions so we can all hear them and the response they get. So much for housekeeping. You already know about the layout for the building in case you need to go to the restroom. Today's program is sponsored by the Justice Committee and the Board of Missions and Outreach. And I am Jennifer Walker, or Jen, chair of the Justice Committee. Many of our members are here in the room with us, and you can spot us by the green ribbons on our badges. As you can see, we're wearing a green ribbon. We're launching the Building for the Future, a Community of Caring ribbon campaign today. And you will see many being worn by church members who are actively working to help others in many different ways, including our disaster relief efforts, our mission grants to nonprofits, packing days at Harry Chapin Food Bank, building days at Habitat, food and clothing drives, and much, much more. So you'll start seeing these green ribbons showing up on church badges of our church members. Today, we are pleased to present two community workers who are making a huge difference in building affordable housing. Reverend Lisa Lefko, CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Collier County since 1999, is ordained in the United Methodist Church and serving Cornerstone United Methodist Church. Lisa is a longtime friend of Naples UCC and has been a guest preacher here for a number of years. I'm going to let her tell you all about Collier's outstanding habitat and the new challenges the organization is facing. You will be interested to know that in addition to being a devotee of nearly every possible outdoor activity, she is married to Brooke, a teacher at Everglades City School, and their grown children and spouses are also active in the community. Lisa will be followed by Dr. Errol Bunzman, who came to our community after a long and impressive career as a corporate turnaround expert, working with companies in real estate development, property management, and higher education institutions. I won't try to cover his extensive and impressive bio. You can read it. I think we've been passing them out. If you didn't get one, we have some up front. But you can see how his career has brought him to his current passion, and serving as chairman of the Immokalee Fair Housing Alliance and also as president of the We Can't Have That Foundation, Inc., a nonprofit dedicated to using education to help break the cycle of poverty and to supporting disaster relief efforts in Immokalee. We planned a series of programs for this season in the spring and summer before Hurricane Ian hit Southwest Florida. Affordable housing has been a crisis for a long time in our community, but it is even more acute now. We are grateful to these two community leaders for agreeing to speak with us and look forward to hearing their updates on their work and what more is needed. Lisa?
Thanks, Jen. You're welcome. Hi, friends. It's great to see everyone. The one thing that I will add to my impressive bio is that I have 3 grandbabies that arrived just this year, and that has been the light and joy of our lives. It's great to be with you, and I love nothing more than being in a setting where we can talk about this critical issue of affordable housing. I do have a slide deck, but I'm going to tell you right away that I'm not really very good at this. So figuring out how to coordinate hands and eyes and words and all of that, I'm much better at just talking about the issue. These are a couple of quick statistics. I don't need to tell you any of this. All of this is what leads into the crisis that's really been a part of Collier County for as long as I've been involved. We moved here in 1994. I began my journey here in Naples at North Naples United Methodist Church, and then through a series of conversations with God, ended up at Habitat for Humanity on the staff there. And so from the very beginning, affordable housing has been an issue for us. And I don't need to tell you why. The cost of living here is extraordinary. And we have this unique community where we have people that have great resources who are dependent upon a strong and large service industry. And that service industry has not kept up in terms of wages to be able to afford to live in Collier County. And so the ripple effect is very obvious. We've had people that have struggled to find places to live here in Collier County, and they've done that in a whole variety of creative ways. And then we've had more recently a wave of migration of people leaving Collier County and driving into the county to serve the community. Hi, Michael. So this creates for us a really significant challenge because now we've got tentacles of challenges going on in all kinds of directions. We've got people that are burning up our roads, which are causing traffic backup and stress on our transportation network. We've got people who can't get to jobs because of the distance that they're traveling and the other issues that may keep them. Some of them are critically important for our survival here, like first responders. We can't keep teachers employed in Collier County. So I don't need to be telling you all of this. You know how this is impacting folks. The statistics are up here, and they're powerful and eye-opening. I'm not going to read them all to you. If you're interested, we can send out the deck so that you can see all of these. And obviously, all of these things lead into the crisis and exacerbates the problem. Now, one of the challenges that we all face in talking about the issue is that we're talking about a subject matter that we have named affordable housing, right? So the nomenclature itself is a stumbling block, because the first time you say affordable housing, what does everybody think of? They're going to think of slums and Cabrini Green and public government housing and public tenements. And so we hit a roadblock in the conversation right up front. So it is important for those of us who care about the issue to begin to talk about it in a different way. Did I turn off the PowerPoint? That's why I shouldn't do this. So we need to start changing the language. So we want to change the language and talk about access to housing that is appropriate and affordable. Affordability is important to everybody. I don't care if you're making, $1 million a year or to $15,000 a year. You still have to have an affordable payment for your home. So you know what that threshold is. These numbers that in order to be affordable, you want to be in a ratio where you're not paying more than about 30% of your monthly income, so that you've got enough money left to take care of the other things that life requires. So that is our goal. Now, we are completely focused on, at Habitat for Humanity, completely focused on home ownership. You'll hear from Errol, and we'll talk a little bit about some differences between our two organizations, but Habitat for Humanity is really focused on home ownership. These are the things that we were just talking about, about the benefits from stable housing. You can see all of it. See, this is really not my thing. As we think about what happens when affordability is achieved, we know that everything else begins to fall in place. Founder of Habitat for Humanity, Millard Fuller, was often heard saying, housing is not everything. People have to have access to education. You were talking about education. They have to have access to healthcare and economic development opportunities. They have to have a job. They have to have clothes to wear and food to eat. All of those things are important and essential, but housing is fundamental because it is the cornerstone upon which all of human development is based. You get housing right, and then education falls into place. When you don't have the housing piece solved, then kids can't get to school because they're dealing with asthma, which is exacerbated by the mold and the mildew in their broken down trailer, or in the apartment that they're living in that's got carpet that hasn't been replaced in a decade, or when a child is at home because they're too sick to go to school. Now a parent has to miss a day of work and call off, and now we've got unemployment issues that are at risk. If a parent wants to improve their education, how do they manage to do that when they're having to work 2 jobs in order to make that affordable, to make that payment affordable for them? So we get housing right, and the other pieces come together. Healthcare improves. We have lots of statistics that show that all kinds of important statistics are impacted simply by getting the housing piece right. So if we as a community are going to agree that this is a critical issue, and this is where you, people of faith, are so important in the conversation, the question for women and men of faith is housing a part of our work as a community? Is it a basic right to have safe, healthy, and affordable housing? And if we agree on that, then that opens the world of possibilities for us. And it leads us into a deeper conversation, because now it's a conversation about how are we going to do that? Where are the resources that we can bring together to have a significant impact on our housing stock? So let's talk about, let's assume that we agree. Do we agree that housing is important? I don't think anybody's going to tell you that's not true. The impact on children, the impact on adults, the impact on our community. Now, in our community, we're missing a critical piece, and that piece is housing that can be accessible by our low wage earning service industry. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because you all and I depend upon this community having all of the pieces that come together to build a diverse and healthy community. And part of that is taking care of each other. Anybody been out to eat in the last week or so? Anybody had to wait to get a table? Even though there were like 12 tables that were open, but there weren't enough servers, or there weren't enough people in the back kitchen. Anybody been to the grocery store recently and had to wait in a long line? Because why? Oh, there aren't enough cashiers. Anybody been to the hospital or an assisted living facility where you've visited somebody or been yourself a patient or a client, and there weren't enough people to deliver a meal or change a bed or bring meds? Anybody that's been to any of our hotels and resorts, which now are, we're suffering from another ripple, right? Because now some of those important resources for our community are impacted by the storm. But we've all enjoyed all of those things. We all depend on all of those things. And it takes all of those things for us to be a vibrant, thriving community. So this critical piece of making sure that we have inventory that is affordable for those that are a significant part of our community is essential to us. And we talk about it in lots of different languages. We talk about it in categories: essential services housing, or workforce housing, affordable housing. All of this is kind of a workaround for us to get comfortable with the idea that we need to be coming together to provide some additional resources. Pressure on the government, because some of this is absolutely impacted by our own laws, regulations, legislation. So part of this is bringing together advocates. Back to our women and men of faith, there is no more important role for the people of God than to stand in the gap and to speak out loudly for those that do not have a voice. So we want to be advocates. We want to put pressure on our elected officials to make this easier, to make it more possible, to invite others to come into the work of providing access to housing that is affordable. And we want to be sharing and connecting the resources that we have to make inventory more available. So, greatest challenges today. Here, let me I'll show you some pretty pictures. Okay, this is important. One of the things that people don't always know about Habitat for Humanity is the process of becoming a Habitat partner family. So at a very high level, our application process depends on 3 qualifications that are universal. There needs to be a demonstrated need, and we see that need manifested in so many ways. We see it demonstrated in people who are sharing small living quarters with another unrelated or related family in order to share the high cost of the rent. We see it in people who are paying more than they should be, 50, 60, 70% of their monthly income on their housing costs, which leaves not enough left over to buy healthy food and to pay for insurance and to put gas in the car. And we see people who are living in just truly substandard conditions because that's all they can find that they can afford. So there's a need and ability to repay the mortgage. Once again, Habitat for Humanity is focused on home ownership. So we are in that moment acting like a bank. So reviewing and underwriting a loan just the way a bank does. And then the third is a willingness to partner with Habitat for Humanity. That partnership begins at the approval of the application through the investment of sweat equity, helping to build their own homes and the homes of their neighbors, and then continues through on-time payments of the mortgage, which creates a nice income stream for us so that we have a sustainable income stream to allow us to continue building homes, added to the income stream that comes from the generosity of this community. Yeah, a lot of these are all things that people have to do to become partners, a lot of education. I'm going to skip all of this. You know this, you already know so much of this. This is the cycle of Habitat for Humanity. We take your generous donations, buy land, build materials, put our volunteers to work, build homes. We don't give those homes away. We sell them with an interest-free loan, interest-free because why? That's what they teach at Harvard and on Wall Street. No, that's not why. Why? Because God says, when you make a loan to brothers and sisters that have a need, don't charge interest. And then that loan is repaid, which allows us to buy more land and build more homes. So we've built a lot of homes. Look at all these beautiful models of homes. We're now building multifamily homes. Vincent's Acres is recently completed. Today, we're working at Whitaker Woods, a neighborhood where we'll have 125 two-story townhomes. We have started putting up the walls at Songbird. Songbird is a stacked condo, so a unit over a unit. That's over on Whippoorwill Drive. So talk about location, just down the street from Avow Hospice. And then Kai Casa is just ready to go vertical. We'll be putting up the first walls in Kai Casa. Kai Casa is a 100-acre site in Immokalee. Finally, will be at its final home site, will be home to 121 families, two-story townhouse product there as well. A little bit about cost of construction. It's really expensive. You know this, but we work very diligently to keep all our costs down. A little breakdown of how costs come in and out of our organization. Here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build more houses because unfortunately, there is no current competition for the work that we're doing. There is no other for-profit or nonprofit organization that is working in the home ownership arena. So we're delighted to have Immokalee Fair Housing Alliance coming into Immokalee, helping to make more homes possible. We'll talk about some of the nuances and differences, but that was almost 15 minutes. So we're going to have plenty of time for questions, but I want to bring Errol up and let him tell you about the Immokalee Fair Housing Alliance and the good work that they have envisioned.
Who here would like to follow Lisa? Lisa's great and Habitat is great. My wife and I have been supporters of Habitat for a couple of decades and plan to continue doing so. Habitat does great work. It's essential for low-income families that want to buy a home and can qualify for a mortgage and earn enough money to be able to do so. Unfortunately, income levels for half of the population in Immokalee can't get there. Even if they could qualify for home ownership, they don't earn enough. So 40% of the applicants for Habitat are turned down because they have low income. The Immokalee Fair Housing Alliance is a 501c3 not-for-profit that is focusing on providing rental housing for the low income and the very low income families at rents that don't exceed 30% of their household income. Since many of you don't know about the Mockley Fair Housing Alliance, I was asked to share a little bit of information about how it came about. It's a relatively young organization, but already has done some things that people said were impossible to do. It was incorporated in December of 2018, had been in existence about 6 months before that, when an alliance, or then a group of disaster assistance organizations, relief organizations, both faith-based as well as governmental and community organizations, like We Can't Have That Foundation, CIW, got together and talked about what were the unmet needs that weren't being addressed. This was at a time when most of the immediate needs were being addressed. And as we went around the room, we had about 16 people in the room in a meeting called the Rocking Chair Meeting. It was hosted by CIW, and everybody sat in a circle in rocking chairs. And as we went around the room, everybody focused on the fact that the unmet need was decent, safe, hurricane-resistant housing. And when they finished going around the room, I said, okay, well, how many organizations here, there were 17 of them, are focused on providing that? Nobody put their hands up. So I asked, how many are with organizations that had worked on housing? UCC Disaster Assistance put their hand up. Presbytery Disaster Assistance hand went up. 12 of the 17 organizations said they had been involved in the past, but the reason they weren't doing it in Immokalee was that it was nearly impossible, if not impossible. Relatively few families controlled the rental housing and controlled the vacant land that could be developed. And they had the political muscle to prevent rezoning, where you need 4 of the 5 commissioners to get it. So at that point, a little arrogantly, I asked whether or not, if I could get some land, would those organizations come up with the money to help, or part of it at least? And everybody said yes. So at that point, we formed a loose group, which became the Immokalee Fair Housing Alliance. Before I go further at this point, perhaps we just show a little 3-minute video. Safe, affordable, hurricane-resistant housing is the missing link to help farm worker families get out of poverty. Immokalee is one of the worst cities in which to live, mostly because of the deplorable housing conditions and the exorbitant rents that are charged. Trailers that are 40 and 50 years old, that are rotted out, that are covered with mold and mildew.
It's unconscionable from where we see it to know that people have to go to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day and then come back to a really horrible situation in regards to housing.
Ellos no les interesa cuántas personas vivan en un cuarto. A veces meten, si viven hombres solos, meten hasta 5, 4 en un cuarto.
Most of us haven't had to worry about that in our lives. We haven't had to worry about rats coming in through the floor, or who's that person sleeping in the next bed, because they'll rent out a bed in a room and you don't know who's there.
We'll be building 8 2-story buildings with 16 apartments in each building. We're building a community with a community center, with classrooms for early childhood education, a playground for the young kids, and a dog walk area, places for bicycles. It makes an ideal place not only to live, but to grow and flourish, support the entire community.
The denomination has a Matthew 25 initiative, and 2 of the points are to deal with structural racism and eradicating systemic poverty. Something that will make a systemic difference in the lives of people who provide food for our tables.
The entire project is being developed, purchase of land, the architecture, the engineering and the construction being developed with grants and donations.
By just giving them a safe place to live, where they're not going to be kicked out on a moment's notice, where they can raise their families, where they can start achieving their dreams.
To build these 128 units will cost around $18 million. So this cannot be done by a handful of individuals. It's going to take churches putting this project into their mission budgets. It's going to take individuals giving small and large gifts, and it's going to take major donors. If that's something that you feel called to do, I hope that you will reach out to us. Your generosity can make this a reality. Your heart can build homes. Your faith has hands and feet that can make a difference.
Ask Alan Penick to join me on the stage. Alan is our treasurer and a key member of the executive committee and on the board. If you would like to see who else is on the board of directors, in the pamphlet, the case statement, there's a list of the directors and their backgrounds. When we started, our focus was on farm worker families that lived year round, not migrant families. At that point in time, in 2018, that was 95% of the unmet need. Today, the need is much, much greater than that. Low-income workers in every field are in need of help. And so we've broadened the scope of our efforts, including to try to address the needs of what the Hunger and Homeless Coalition has called the newly homeless, which are families that have lived in the same apartment for 15 years, buildings that were subsidized with government funds, but where the agreements to keep the rents affordable have grandfathered out. And their rents are going from $600 to $1,800 and $2,000, and they have being evicted with nowhere to go. Families and senior citizens. It's a really deplorable situation that screams out for people to get involved in providing home ownership as well as rental housing, and to try to create a path to ownership for those that are renting. Here. So the Mockley Fair Housing Alliance is a 501c3 not-for-profit. All of the funds that we raise go right into the project. There are none of the officers or directors receive any compensation other than for the heart. I know.
This has pretty well been covered. Let me go on to the next one.
Right. We're going to skip over things that Lisa has covered more than adequately. As we said, we came about right after Hurricane Irma. And there was while the housing crisis or shortage had existed for a decade before that, it was made even worse by that hurricane and even worse again by the current hurricane. The solution is to make safe, affordable housing available to those families. So we're developing 128 rental units in a community on 10 acres of land. Next slide.
There's a delay there.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
So the community will have 8 multifamily buildings with 16 units in each building, half 2-bedroom and half 3-bedroom, a community center, which has classrooms for early childhood education, a computer lab and library, and a meeting area where the residents can meet, but also where partnering organizations can come in and provide services, like educational services, like immigration services, legal services, medical services. So, and the healthcare network will be bringing their mobile van. So all of the services that are needed will be available right in the community. This is some of the donors that have already helped us acquire the land, do all the environmental studies, the engineering, construct the infrastructure for the entire complex, and to get ready for the buildings to start coming up. Some of the names on there, I'm sure you'll recognize. Most are faith-based, but there are also some corporations that are active. We've been asked to indicate the support that we've received from denominations as well as from others. Why don't we go there?
And I think, like Lisa said, we're looking at the very low income, even a little bit lower than hers, because all they can afford is rental. So, and there's a couple of key things. One is everybody we serve is going to be less than 50% of the median income in the county. And everybody we serve will be paying rent less than 30% of their household income, so that they have the other income, as Lisa was saying, for insurance, for gasoline, for whatever the other needs are, so they have a decent way of life. The other thing that's not on one of the slides that I think is extremely important is that the community, after it is funded and built, is totally self-sustaining, even with rents as low as $650 and $700 a month, and as high as $1,000 or $1,100 a month based on income and based on unit size. Even with those low rents, we will have everything to pay for all the maintenance, all the upkeep, the landscape, all of that stuff's covered, and reserves for long-term maintenance like roofs and parking and roads and all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it is a self-sustaining community. Doesn't mean we won't come back to people for more funds, because we've got access to the property next door and we'd like to do it all over again. So, but I think that's two very important things to see who's being served and to know that it's not really a gift. Their rent pays for everything. The gift is that we've got the houses furnished, okay? I do have some numbers here. If he gets me to the next slide, yeah, there we go. There's the thank you. There we go. Here's where our money has come from so far. We've raised about $4.7 million. $1.6 million has come from individuals, $1.6 million from foundations, denominations and churches, about $1.4 million. One of the individuals was Peter Buffett's Warren's son, who gave us $1 million, which certainly made a big difference. And excuse me, that actually was foundation. He heads up the Novo Foundation. Under the individuals, we had a company that was going to donate all the concrete for all the buildings. They ended up selling the company. So when they sold the company, they took $1 million of what they got and they gave us a check for that. So we've had two real nice donations that are getting us well along the way for that first building. Here's kind of how the denominations have contributed: the United Church of Christ, the Florida Conference, disaster relief, and individual churches and members within our area. Presbyterian Church, the same thing, the disaster assistance, and churches and their members. And then if you look at the other denominations, you see just how many denominations we've had involved. Most of these, where it says other churches, it wasn't the denomination support, it was the individual churches. So that's really quite something to show, I think.
The faith-based organizations, the churches and disaster relief organizations were not only part of the creation of the Immokalee Fair Housing Alliance, but critical and essential for to be able to get up and get going and to get to where we are today and do what a lot of people said was impossible to do.
The other thing, the status of where we are today, we've got the land, it's paid for, no mortgage on it. We have all the infrastructure in for all 8 buildings, for all the sewer, all the water, all the internet connections, all the electrical, all of those pipes are in. We're ready to go. It's all underground. And like I said, the roads and even some of the curbs. All right. We didn't put curbs by the houses because we don't want to break them down when we put up the buildings. So that's where we are in that. We have a contract on the building. You heard in the video that we're looking total cost about $18 million. Well, that's 2 years old. Our cost is about 40% higher, which I think anybody involved, and I think you find it too. So we're probably going to be closer to $28 million by the time we get it all built. So it's taken quite a bit. We'll get questions later. I'll catch you. Okay, thank you. We're very far along with the permit. We're on our 4th go around with Collier County. This last particular submittal was just for sprinklers in the buildings, which aren't required, but we chose to put them in because we knew we had kids living there and we wanted to have it safe. So we've had to answer the sprinkler question two or three different ways, but I'm being told we're probably 10 days to 2 weeks away from having a permit for the first building. And our contractor says when he has a permit in hand, it's going to take him about 2 weeks to get everybody back out there and working. So with any luck at all, sometime in November, we'll have a slab and some concrete block going up on that first building. So we're pretty excited about that.
Hurricanes are on a lot of people's minds right now. All the buildings were designed and engineered to be hurricane resistance to category force 5 winds, 155 miles an hour or above. At the time we did it, people were saying we were overbuilding, but we just had the hurricane land at close to 155 mile an hour winds. So we're glad we did it. The buildings are actually designed the way you would design a recovery center where people would go in the event of a disaster. The only thing we're missing is a kitchen in the community center.
And generators.
And a generator.
We're looking at a generator for the community center. But when we looked at generators for the individual buildings, which we thought, well, we can get somebody to finance that or whatever. The problem became fuel. Are you going to have propane tanks? Where are you going to have them? Are they going to be underground? Are you going to have gasoline? Are you going to have diesel fuel? And it just became a problem that we couldn't solve. But at least we've got everything underground in the community, which will help. And the community center will have air conditioning.
I think our 15 minutes of fame is up. So
Okay, great. Thank you both. I'm sure there are loads of questions. And so right here, pass it along. We need you on the mic to ask your question so the webinar audience can hear.
Thank you. First of all, I'm impressed with your geographic support. I saw Longboat Key and other areas, and that's great. Are you going to offer any type of centralized ancillary service such as a insurance package? First of all, is it a gross or net lease? And will you be offering services that you can make it a one-stop for them so they don't all go out in 15 different ways and some pay more or less and provide professional services for the ancillary items?
great question. We will be providing it not through the Immokalee Fair Housing Alliance, but the partnering organizations that have all agreed to work with us. And they're all the organizations that you know that serve Immokalee now. It's the children of the families that'll be housed there are the same children that go to Pathways, RCMA, or Guadalupe, or served by the hospital. And so they'll all be there providing those services. The rents that we're setting provide an allowance for utilities. And I'm not sure if I answered all your question. Is there any other component?
You talked about 128 families and obviously Habitat is 2,800 have been built. Do you have any idea what the need, if you could build as many houses and as many apartments in Immokalee, what would that be? I mean,
Let me. Sure, go ahead.
During all this time, Collier County has had a deficit at a minimum of 10,000 units. Sometimes it's been higher, it's never been low. Today, the forecast is that if we were in some magical way able to catch up by providing a minimum of 10,000 units in our supply, that there would still be a growing need of somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 units a year. 128 rental units, 100 habitat homes a year. That's not going to do it. That's where that advocacy, and by the way, we just had an event that has exacerbated the problem. What happened with Ian Fitness, that it hit the book, right? And so we have a swath of people that were impacted. Many of you may have been impacted in this room. Most of the people that live right along the water and the coast, they have resources, and they're going to be able to put things together and access insurance, flood insurance, so on and so forth. But then it also had devastating consequences on several low-lying pockets of poverty in our community. Areas that primarily have older housing. So I'm talking about the Bayshore neighborhood, the Brookside neighborhood.
That's so funny, you guys. So yes, the devastating impact on the pockets of poverty that don't have the resources and wherewithal. And by the way, many of the units there are rental housing that are investor owned, and investors may be slow to come in and do the repair work. I had a conversation with one of our commissioners this morning who's concerned about particularly the Bayshore area, where folks, in order to rebuild, if you remember the threshold is if you've got 51% or greater damage on your home, it has to be raised and you have to start over again. And now you have to meet new code, which includes building up to a higher floodplain. So FEMA maps have changed even since Irma. And so now it means bringing in yards and yards and yards of filter to get up above a floodplain. So we're going to have the consequences of Ian are going to be long felt here. In Immokalee, the impact was much greater with Irma than with Ian. And when we saw with Irma, what we saw in Irma was a windstorm, right? What we saw in Ian was a water storm. We had a water event. And the wind event was devastating. Trailers twisted, roofs torn off. The housing stock in Immokalee is as bad as it has ever been. We have never made any progress. Though there are 1,000 Habitat for Humanity homes, though we have plans to do more, we are not gaining. That was a long answer to your question.
Let me add just a little bit to it. While 128 rental units is a virtual drop in the bucket, it's very, very meaningful, not just for those families, but for the community, to give them hope. Everybody believed that it couldn't be done. Nothing was ever going to be done to address it. You wouldn't be able to get property rezoned. We got unanimous approval from the planning department of Collier County, unanimous approval from growth management, and unanimous approval from the county commissioners to rezone the land to be able to put the 128 units on property where that was designed for 40. So the impact of those units, showing both developers and the residents that it is possible, that change is coming, that there is hope, is much more significant than just the number itself.
I'd like to just insert someone right here who can tell us a little bit more about things that need to be done in addition to building the housing and funding the housing that we need. And Michael Puhala is, you give your credentials, Michael.
Yeah, super quick. Well, thank you. I had no intention of hijacking this. Michael Puhala, I'm with Housing Development Corporation of Southwest Florida. We do business as HELP. We're the only HUD-approved housing counseling agency in Naples. And in 2020, we launched the Collier County Community Land Trust. So we're working to get land accessible. We're really excited to start working with Habitat. In fact, we have a meeting on the calendar for.
Did you send it to me?
Got it too. Yeah. You'll get it. So anyway, I also attend the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meetings regularly. The commissioners had been intending to have a workshop surrounding housing affordability to talk about some policy changes that were, if we go back to 2017, Urban Land Institute came in, they did an assessment. It talked about the need for 10,000 units plus about 1,600 per year. That's what we need to add to stock. That was their thoughts on it after reviewing a lot of details in our community. But they also engaged the commissioners and said, here's some of the things you can do. Starting a community land trust was one that has been implemented. There were 4 more changes to land development code that just made it a more hospitable environment to start creating not only affordable, but also mixed use development, sometimes a little bit higher density, which can be a little off-putting at times, but if it's in the right places and it's responsible, it can make a lot of sense. If we don't have an environment where any developers that have expertise in affordability are coming in, we're never going to gain any ground. It's not going to be done by local developers that are doing the type of inventory that we typically see. Very homogeneous, gated community, not a lot of density. That's just, you have to have developers that have the expertise. The short story is we need to get that workshop on the agenda. It's been put off several times. It was pulled. These last 4 initiatives have been put on the side for now. So we're trying to get that scheduled. I just saw an email come through this morning from our president of the chair of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is Joe Trachtenberg. He spoke here a while back with myself. So if you're familiar with Joe, he's asking everybody and anybody to email the commissioners and say, we really want to have this public workshop. It needs to be a separate item. It can't just be at a meeting where there's one item talked about relating to affordability. We want to see what resources, what individuals are going to come forward and really help. And let's talk about the initiatives and let's get this thing moved forward, because policy, we can't rely on government for everything, but the policy is critical. If we want to see change, if we want to see some more opportunities than what we've seen in the past, we have to have some of this policy addressed. So I can certainly, if anybody's interested, forward Joe's email. He has given some, I guess, talking points that individuals can use to send that forward. So talking to your commissioners, we want to get that workshop scheduled and get this thing moving forward.
Great.
Thank you, Michael. And I have that email in case anybody wants it. I'll be happy to forward it. But we have to do a lot. What we've got with Lisa and Errol and their organizations is one way to tackle the problem. And as Lisa and Errol have said, it's not enough. A lot more has to be done. And we've got to get our commissioners to allow us to move forward on some of the things that they can do in terms of policy that will attract the developers and make it affordable for developers to build here.
They opened up a new area that was how to solve the potential gap. And what I'm referring to is we have one particular landlord with a unique model of how he handles the rental properties in a blighted area near the casino when you drive into town. Is there a price that can be bought to get that property commandeered and put him out of business and convert that property with a better return on investment?
I can't tell you that there's a price point. I mean, he's got a cash cow. He's not motivated, and there wouldn't be anything other than legislation that would force him to sell that property. I mean, I like your thinking.
I do know that rural neighborhoods attempted to buy the land. And the answer was $1 million an acre. And the justification for it was you put 10, 15, 20 trailers and you put 10, 15 people in each trailer, charging them $100 a week per person. And you can't afford to sell it for less than $1 million. So until there's housing available, whether it's home ownership or rental, for those families to be able to move out of those slum conditions into decent housing at rents they can afford, then those things will be there. I asked when I first started working on the project, why the Immokalee CRA, Community Redevelopment Authority, doesn't condemn the trailers that should be condemned. And the answer was, there's no place for the people to go. We don't want to put them on the street. But as soon as you have a rental unit available for them to move into, if you tell us the day they move out, we'll slap a condemnation notice on it, and the owner will have 90 days to fix it up, or it'll be torn down. So the answer to the problem, how do you get rid of them, is not to try to buy them, but put them out of business. Build enough decent, safe, affordable housing that could be rented at for less than 30% of household income. And there will be no need for them. Nobody will want to live there.
I've been involved for years with the rural land stewardship area being developed in the eastern part of Collier County, which is 200,000 acres that was supposed to be a stewardship area. And in that process, it's probably comparable to 2 or 3 Fort Lauderdales will be built out there. And in the process over 20 years, it's been very difficult to work with the commissioners. They've approved gated community after gated community after gated community, and I've stood before those commissioners, and many people in this room have done the same thing, demanding that there be affordable housing. One of the things that has come out of recent approvals of things like Rivergrass and some of the Belmar and all these developments is that they finally got the commissioners to say, we need to do something about affordable housing, and about the best you're going to get is from the developers, is for them to set aside a lot land as part of their approval of these developments. And they may give us land, but they're not going to help with the cost of building it because they're going to let the taxpayers do that. But that's really where this has to happen, because the developers are making money, and the burden of those communities is being put on the taxpayers, and from roads to everything else. And the best you can do is to get them to start to give the land and provide more impact fees to help them pay for some of what they're building. So that's really the crux of the problem.
Yeah, I think it's a great, you're exactly right. So putting pressure now, like our elected officials don't want to legislate that, right? They don't want to, that's inclusionary zoning. A forced affordable component is not appealing. It was part of the ULI recommendations, but because of your voices, they are aware that this is an issue that many care about. And so they are now putting the onus on those developers as they're coming up with, with a rezone and asking for greater density, or asking for movement from ag land to residential land, the commissioners are now saying, what are you going to do in your project to provide access to affordability? So it's voluntary. And I'm not even saying that that's not a great thing, because it's some developers have elected to do more. Ultimately, what would be a huge benefit to Habitat is to build that partnership between those developers, and that's happening. I'm delighted to tell you that we are in the midst of 2 partnerships with for-profit developers who are building market rate housing, but who have invited Habitat to come in and build that required affordable component. Not yet. Not yet. And you know, they're not Collier Enterprises anymore, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there. So that strategic alliance between for-profit developers, it's the incentive that we need to be able to open this up, to be able to do incrementally, exponentially more. Habitat can continue to do this one lot at a time, one home at a time, even one neighborhood at a time. But to be now in a position where we can come in and make, you know, the supply exponentially greater. We're talking about doubling, tripling, you know, multiplying production 10 times. That's going to make impact. That's where impact exists.
Yeah, the strategic partnerships that Lisa is speaking of is one part of it, but it's not the whole solution. What the commissioners need to hear is that when they talk about affordable housing, they're talking about 80% minimum of the area median income, which is now $98,000 a year. There are lots of families that can't afford the market rate housing that any for-profit builder can provide. It has to be, the commissioners have to provide incentives for development of affordable housing that meets the needs of 50% or below of area median income. And it can be done. If you give not-for-profit or for-profit developers who are agreeing to provide that type of housing, waive the impact fee. It's $17,000 a unit, whether it's a 750 square foot apartment or a $5 million house. It's the highest impact fee any place in the state. It could be less, or you could have the developer spread the payment over 30 years, not 10 years.
Once upon a time, there was a waiver of impact fees for low wage earners. It actually was a program that existed only in Immokalee. But then so today, impact fees are deferred. So for developers of rental property, you've got this period of time that it can be paid. For home ownership, a home buyer that is qualified, making less than 80% of the area median income. So family of four, that's about 75.5. Just to give you a little context. So today, that impact fee can be deferred. So it's a lien on the property that has to be paid. So you still don't, you know, you still can't get around the impact fee.
And with that deferral, I think you can also, with that deferral, it's LIBOR plus 2%, which right now is over 5%, and it'll change every time the LIBOR changes. So if you defer your impact fee, you'll be paying 6-7% on what you defer. To give you a size, the impact fees on 148 days, $2.5 million. $20 million the rates. Just the impact fee could have $1 million. On top of all the permit fees, on top of all the inspection fees, there's a lot. Like Lisa said, that's where you can make it.
Mike for Mike.
This may be a rhetorical question, but something for us to think about if we're all faith-based sitting here. So we live in one of the richest counties in the United States. I don't know what the per capita income is or the investments, but what do we have to do? What do faith-based organizations such as churches and Habitat, what do we have to do to inspire people that have great wealth to share some of that wealth to make building these kind of projects easier as far as the fundraising goes?
Let us take them on a tour of Immokalee and see how
Or
people are
Naples.
living.
We can see things in Naples as well. So yes, so much of what it takes, Mike, is just you telling somebody else about this conversation. It's people talking to people. So come out to a Habitat job site, go home and tell 10 people about what you did that day and what you learned. Go
Organize
home
it.
this evening and tell folks about what you heard about what the Immokalee Fair Housing Alliance is doing and their vision for serving the very low income farming community in Immokalee.
It's also the low income working families at this point and the newly homeless. But another way to do it is organize a house party, invite 3 or 4 families. We'll come and present. We'll share the information with them.
Sadly, it's a story that's been repeated over and over again. Certainly the development of Naples Manor, look at what happened in River Park and the George Washington Carver projects. Look at what happened in Golden Gate City. Golden Gate City was developed to be our blue collar community. So I will tell you that I had years ago a conversation with a commissioner who said, why isn't it okay for all of our workforce to live in Immokalee? Well, that's not okay. We do not create the strength of diversity and a homogeneous community that works together when we segregate folks based on their economic level. That's not healthy for anybody. Of course. Collier.
Lisa, to your point, I once described the county as becoming economic apartheid.
Yeah.
The workers could come and work here during the day, but they have to go home at sundown because they can't afford to live here.
We've often compared it to a third world country. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We've got one question way in the back, Jen.
Way in the back, and I'd like
Yeah, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more how the amendment that we're going to be voting on in a couple of weeks, increasing the homestead exemption, I think it is for essential workers, how that will possibly affect the situation and or your thoughts on how to make it more affordable for essential workers to work here, especially teachers who we desperately need to retain in Collier County.
Reduces my understanding is reduces the tax on home ownership. But that's, that's
Yes.
which is important.
Yes. Yes. So it certainly, when we do the economics now, a little different equation in a rental development than in home ownership. But when we do the math in determining what a home buyer can afford to pay, part of that monthly payment includes the escrow or reserve account, which is that collected for property taxes, homeowners insurance, flood insurance, and any HOA or condominium dues. So it's a critical part of the affordability equation when you say, okay, look, minimum qualifying income for Habitat for Humanity is $30,000 a year. So folks have to be making a minimum of $30,000 a year. That's roughly 30% of the area median income. So that $30,000, just because Lisa doesn't do math easily, let's call it 36,000. That's $3,000 a month in income, roughly translates to $1,000 a month that you can afford to pay for your housing. So $1,000 in rent, $1,000 in a monthly payment, which has to include the first mortgage and that reserve. And then any additional support that needs to be included to make that payment affordable. So if you take the real numbers for Habitat for Humanity today, our current build site in Whitaker Woods, we're beginning with an escrow payment of between $500 and $600 a month, which leaves $400 to $500 a month for that same individual to pay towards their first mortgage. So that would equate to essentially their rent. But certainly property taxes is an important part of that. Property taxes are reduced by the homestead exemption, can be reduced again by this essential workers exemption. It's a little bit challenging because what happens when you get a raise and you no longer are qualified as an essential worker? Now it gets recalibrated. Or what happens if you move into a different occupation outside of the list of qualified essential occupations? I find it challenging. And he's not even a plant.
The impact of wages over $16.50 an hour with a mother and a single child kicks that person off of welfare benefits. And that's part of what the $15 an hour scam was developed to do, is to get people, but the companies retaliated by reducing the hours to $28. So we've got an anomaly built into the system to always keep people down on the farm and not earn too much. And that's another area that can help solve the situation.
We got a lot of anomalies, and there's a lot of, this is part of the challenge. We got a lot of systemic challenge, and it's not an easy solution, right? If there was a silver bullet, we would have shot it long ago. So you're absolutely right. Now, the wages issue is really has been market driven recently because of low unemployment. So people are having to pay $15 an hour just to keep employees. So that's the way you want it to work, rather than for it to be legislated into action. You want it to be market responsive. So we've seen that, and it is reducing the deficit, the gap between what is affordable and what people are earning. But we're never going to get there. The trajectory is too wide, and it's continuing to grow. So we can bring up wages as much as we want, and we're still not going to get in Collier County without some pressure, downward pressure on affordability.
All right, we have a Zoom audience with a question.
I think this is similar to a comment and a question. What are considered essential workers seems not to be inclusive. Some might say that waitresses and waiters, maintenance workers, garbage collectors, et cetera, don't seem to be covered. Also, the property tax reduction does not make the worker qualified to buy a house.
Correct. It does not qualify someone to buy a house. The essential workers list, and this is where what the language that we use is so important. And we need to be thoughtful and mindful about the words that we choose. And it really has been the effort to get away from talking about affordable housing. So we in the world that we work in, there are some HUD definitions that speak to the income level and housing arena. So in HUD language, folks are very low income, moderate income. And this is where this community has struggled, because Errol talked a little bit about the lack of access for families making less than 50% of the area median income. So today that would be about $48,000 for a family of 4. So certainly there's a lack of access to anything for folks making less than 50% of the area median income.
Very, very
But
low,
there
very
is-
low at 30%.
But there is also a huge deficit for families making between 80 and 120 or up to 140% of the area median income. And so this is where it's led to the community conversation to identify essential workers. So now all of that language kind of went up in the apple basket when COVID hit, and we realized, oh my gosh, the person who stocks toilet paper at Walmart is suddenly very essential. And so we had a little different definition. And you had to qualify as an essential service provider in order to be able to continue to run your business. Otherwise, businesses, remember, were locked down. So we've loosened the definition around essential services or essential workers. But primarily that came up through those, that missing middle.
If you're running a business in Collier County today, you know that you can't get enough workers in every category. Every single category today is essential and critical. And so we don't look at those definitions anymore, or those titles. The question is it a family that is working and living, that they're paying their taxes, and they deserve decent, safe, affordable housing? I don't care whether they're working in the pharmacy as a teller or as a pharmacy assistant or the pharmacist. Everybody's entitled to a decent place to live and a decent place to raise their families. As Lisa mentioned, Habitat for Humanity is the only not-for-profit that is developing ownership housing. And the Immokalee Fair Housing Alliance is the only not-for-profit that is developing the housing for people making less than 50% and the very low income making less than 30%.
Okay, and we're going to wrap this up pretty soon and let you have individual questions if you have, but
There's one other area we haven't talked about, and that's senior citizens. And the impact of that is the rule was, and I don't know how long it was, that if you built affordable housing and you got a bonus density agreement or anything like that, you were required to keep it as affordable housing for 15 years. The county is now, at least our requirement is 30 years, and it looks like they're pushing that in more areas. But that 15 years has run out on a lot of government housing and other affordable housing. And you had seniors living there on a very small retirement and Social Security paying $700 a month rent. All right. And all of a sudden, the 15 years is up. The people that developed it or own it have sold it at a nice price. The new buyers are demanding higher rent to pay for their investment. And you see $700 rent go to be $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 rent. And people getting $2,000 of Social Security and maybe a little bit of retirement literally are being forced out of the place they've lived for maybe the last 15 years. And so there's another whole need for housing we haven't really talked about today.
thank you. I mean, this is obviously we care. I mean, this is a very involved and very committed and very into the subject of affordable housing crisis. We're going to have some more programs on the subject from a different perspective. On November 14th, we've got the head of Wounded Warriors of Collier County talking about veterans and the housing for veterans. That includes both affordable and shelter housing. And then in January, we have someone from the Conservancy who's going to be telling us about eco development. So while we are very concerned about making affordable housing, which calls for more density, we're also very concerned about the environment. So we want to be conscious of that. And then we're going to get into seniors, the needs for the seniors in general. And we'll have two speakers in February on that. And then in March, we're supposed to have Stephen Kirk from Rural Neighborhoods talking about the long promised, long awaited development at the Golden Gate Golf Course, which will include affordable housing, but will include for seniors, for essential workers, and for veterans. And that is one that's been very much supported by the Chamber of Commerce, Moorings Foundation, and the Community Foundation and the Schultz Foundation. So it's a project that, and their story is really it makes you just sort of gasp at the years it's taken to get to the point where they're supposed to break ground in January. And I hope the hurricane hasn't changed that story. So there are some other aspects to this story, but I really appreciate Michael coming today because he's involved in it all. He knows it all. I try to get to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meetings. Joe Trachtenberg and Michael spoke here in the spring. And from there, I started trying to get more immersed in this. I encourage you all to get immersed in it, read the articles. There was a great front page article in today's paper, which really covered a lot of the update on the subject. And it's gotten worse, so much worse with the hurricane. What little affordable housing we had, other than those wonderful homes you build, Lisa, yeah, a lot of them just got washed away. So it's a critical situation right now. And we're going to keep our eyes on it, and we're going to be focused on it, Naples United Church of Christ this year. And I encourage you all, come back, come to our meetings, but also get involved, write your county commissioner, and really push them to have this workshop. So thank you so much.